29 years on, we must in fact realize that the majority of South Africans are still disenfranchised and still marginalized, especially socioeconomically. We're dealing with the highest rates of gender-based violence and unemployment, especially youth unemployment, that the country has seen. And so, what freedom means to us at the foundation is fully realizing those rights of our constitutional project that we have yet to really fully feel the effect of.
And when we zoom into women in particular, because you know that previously under the apartheid regime, women were often more marginalized and did not have many opportunities. And now, 29 years later, there are some sort of opportunities that have presented themselves. Would you say that they've been able to take advantage of those opportunities?
I think women are very capable and very talented. And of course, when opportunities are presented to them, I'm sure that they've taken advantage of those. But we must still realize that there's nuance within that. I think many women still may not have access to those opportunities. And that's compounded intersectionally with particularly amongst women of color and, Black women or trans women not being able to equally access those opportunities as much as other women, white or Indian, right? I think that exists on a spectrum. And I hope that answers your question in that regard.
And what would you say when you look into, the challenges that women are faced with in terms of realizing the opportunities? What would you say begin to be the stumbling blocks here when it comes to unlocking those freedoms which we have been given now?
I think that the stumbling blocks to women still are very fundamentally based in the patriarchy. I think women children, or rather girl children, still don't have as great access to school. I think there are still issues around girls leaving high school or not finishing high school because they're falling pregnant and not being adequately catered for. I think that there's still stumbling blocks within the workplace, right? I think women still face discrimination in the workplace for their gender. And so I think at all levels, really, there are still stumbling blocks. I think we have seen great advances with women before us, much like yourself, I imagine, going through those paces, breaking those glass ceilings, making spaces for women like myself as we come up. But I think we still continuously face very subtle microaggressions that have yet to be dealt with.
One thing in particular that the country experienced, especially during the pandemic, was the growing problems around gender-based violence. And we saw a scourge or an increase in gender-based violence. And it's something that you touched on just a bit earlier. Would you say that with the increased gender-based violence in this country, it's something that, pulls us back as a country, especially now that we're celebrating this 29 years of freedom?
Of course, yes. I think statistically, right, if women are half of the population, anything that affects half the population will naturally regress the country. But more than that, I think women seen as a minority and a vulnerable group and not being adequately protected or safeguarded under this kind of oppressive gender-based violence that we're seeing, that's going to affect the country. And we must also recognize the wonderful idiom that we have in the country, which is that if you strike a woman, you strike a rock, right? Which was founded on the 1956 March to the Union buildings. Part of that is a recognition of what a core role women play in our society, right? Through mothers, through caregivers, through all their many functions and iterations, not only in the workplace as we foregrounded earlier, but also in more intimate and personal spaces. And I think then when this very important sector of society is oppressed and is hurt through gender-based violence, this is going to fundamentally affect the very core and rock of our society.
In recent years, Divashnee, we've seen, the issue of gender-based violence, of course, but more importantly, we now have this gender-based violence summit that the president is spearheading. When it comes to the fight against femicide and the problems around women. Would you say that this is enough? What more needs to be done to highlight the problems that women face, especially in their homes, centered around gender-based violence and, of course, femicide?
Well, I think sticking more to what the foundation does in terms of legal work, we would want to see the president come true on his promise to institute sexual offences courts to specifically deal with gender-based violence crimes. We would then also see that filter down in terms of caseworkers and social workers who deal with these crimes. We would also then want to see, the NPA take greater care of pursuing perpetrators of gender-based violence and getting convictions so that women feel that when they take that risk and face that potential stigma and go through that sort of trauma of having whatever offense against them that was committed against them, and they take that and see it through the legal process, that at least the government is doing the basic of their part, right? And finding justice in that regard through the criminal justice system. I think that is the basic of what we can expect from our government and should expect from our government. And anything more, we should always advocate for. Women's Month should be more than Women's Month because perennially women face the kind of threat around them.
All right, Divashnee, also just looking at, the role that women play, it's something that you also spoke about a bit earlier on, just talking about, once women realize their freedoms, it sort of has a ripple effect in terms of growing a better society. What is your take on that?
I'm biased naturally, but I think there is something to be said on the ripple effect that women have. I think even historically, right, and it was the way that the apartheid regime worked that a lot of men had to leave home and move towards more urban areas to find work, and women stayed at home and raised families, right? And that's not to say that that's sort of a regressive gender role, but more on the idea that those communities are really founded on women and they raise society, so to speak. And I think that's true for most communities in South Africa. The reason why most women say that the person they look up to is their mother is because our parents and our mothers in particular have such a deep impact on the people who we become, right? And so that informs then the way that you live your life as a whole, the decisions you make, and that in turn serves a ripple effect, right? Because it serves then the person that you are at work, the person that you are in your friendship circle, the person that you are in your intimate relationship with a significant other. And it affects really every part of your life. And so I can't really understate the ripple effect that women have on society.